A lot of us grew up thinking that we need to blend into society. We need to not rock the boat and keep silent so as to serve the greater good. The thing with that though is it's a slow acting poison and it's slowly draining our life away. Today, I'm taking the antidote myself. I'm pushing through my fear and coming on camera, starting this channel. You know, I was wondering what should I do for my first video, and I kind of realized, hey, why not look at myself? Or more, have a look at the environment of self-censorship and why we do this. In this video, we're going to have a look at the forces that try and take your spark of light away from you and how you can reclaim your authenticity. This is an issue that's dear to my heart. When I was young, I came from a poor family, but I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to an elite private school. But going there, I felt like an imposter. I had to be someone I really wasn't. After school, I had to think about my career. Unfortunately, my dad was absent most of my childhood, but he was an accountant and my grandfather was too, and that was something I was good at, so I decided to go down the accounting path, even though it really wasn't for me. In any sort of corporate role, you have to blend into the environment and be fake, really. You can't be your true self. And so, again, I gave a lot of myself away. It got to a head about a year ago where I had to quit a job due to extreme burnout. I just could not do it mentally anymore. And then a few months later, I was hospitalized for a week. It's still impacting me. In fact, I found out I need to go back to hospital next week, the 24th of February. I'm not sure when I'll release it, but I'm still working through it. It does show me that it's so important to be able to express yourself, to not self-censor, to reveal your true self. So this, I think, is the perfect first video. These days we live in an environment of constant surveillance. Just go outside. You'll see cameras everywhere. I mean, you've got a camera in your pocket. You've got a cell phone in your pocket. It's interesting, cell phone, I think is a very good metaphor. These days, we're prisoners to our own speech. We know that our devices and the internet, they record things forever. Anything deemed cancelable is punished with excommunication. And that makes me think of the Christians of the 16th and 17th century, the Puritans. Back then, you were either a sinner or one of the saved. There was no one in the middle. If you were considered one of the saved, but you committed a sin, you're a sinner forever. And online, with the whole cancel culture thing, it feels the same. I feel like we're the new age or the new puritanicals. If you're deemed to be toxic or evil, you're attacked, you're gone after, and what you've said will live with you for the rest of your life. So, for the rest of us seeing this, it feels like it's safer to remain behind the scenes, to basically view the real world as a battlefield, and isn't it just easier to stay off the battlefield altogether and basically avoid the predators? What does this lead to? It leads to self-censorship. We think to ourselves, should I say this or should I not say that? We have a fear that what we say could be misinterpreted or misunderstood, sometimes deliberately. It makes me think of the Soviet era. Back then, families were afraid to speak their minds in their own homes. Some children would sometimes rat on their parents and tell the police if they were saying things which were deemed anti-government. I mean, going back to the cell phone, are they listening to us these days? It makes you wonder because it creates that environment. We fear that what we say could be taken out of context. It could be misinterpreted or misunderstood. When it's done deliberately this makes it so much worse. In psychology, there's the concept of the grey man. The grey man is basically where you make yourself so bland, so boring, almost like nothingness, that you can't trigger offence in others, that you'll blend into the crowd. It's the idea that you adopt the mannerisms and characteristics of those around you. A lot of us who have been in the corporate world will certainly relate to that because you're expected to behave a certain way. So myself as an accountant in the past, I always had to be boring and bland and myself. My interests outside of work wouldn't bring in. I'd never talk about spirituality. I'd never really talk about roller coasters. I love roller coasters. I love horror movies, that sort of thing. I was just a good corporate employee. Really what I was doing and what we do when we do that is we're adopting a camouflage. We're a chameleon. We act like the environment is a predator and we blend into it to avoid detection. In New Zealand, we have a concept called tall poppy syndrome. It's basically the idea that the tallest flowers get chopped down. If you're seen as being too successful, you draw the jealousy and the attention of others in a negative way. And if I think about it from a censorship and a free speech perspective, I kind of see the same thing as well. Those who are loudest, those who have the strongest voice, attract the most criticism, don't they? I came across an interesting statistic. It's from the Journal of General Internal Medicine, and it's that 82% of professionals feel like they are imposters, that they have imposter syndrome. That's terrible. Having been a professional myself in the accounting profession, I certainly do relate. There's also the psychological concept called the spiral of silence. It's basically the idea that we scan the mood of a room, we try and figure out what the opinion on a certain topic is, and we form our own ideas of what we're going to say around that. So we try and figure out if what we're going to say is going to draw judgment or go against the majority. And if it is going to go against the majority, we won't say it. We are self-censoring in that way. But the thing with that is that we're assuming a certain opinion and it may not be true. We humans have a tendency towards a negativity bias, to think things are worse than they actually are. We're doing it at scale. We're basically creating an environment that's perpetually making itself worse and worse to be our true selves. So from a biological perspective, why do we do this? Our brain has this thing called the default mode network. You can think of it as autopilot. Autopilot's great for day-to-day life and getting things done. You don't have to think about things too much. But when things get quiet, it doesn't necessarily work for us. I don't know about you, but I do tend to think about things quite a bit. I can ruminate and kind of run through scenarios in my head and judge myself and evaluate myself as to how I've done. The default mode network can make you critical of yourself. It does have a tendency for some of us to self-sabotage and block our creativity because we're ruminating and thinking on things that we've done or said or might do. The default mode network, it can get hijacked. When we're growing up, we get these scripts or programs or beliefs from our parents, from our schooling system, from our culture, from the world at large. And all of those sets of beliefs and programs, they can form into effectively an inner voice or an inner critic within you that guides your behavior and tells you what you should and what you shouldn't do. The problem though is that it's very easy to mistake this voice for your own, when it's not really your own, it's what you've been told. It makes you think things like, I should be doing better, I'm a failure, why am I this way, why are people able to do this better than I am, and it does tend to focus on the negatives, and you might notice a lot of the time it doesn't kind of give you the positives or the good things to look at. So what's the overall impact this is having on us biologically? Well, let's have a look at the heart as a bit of an analogy. So The sort of food that you eat can have quite a big impact on what goes on in your bloodstream and in your veins and arteries. If you have a lot of bad food, then you have cholesterol in your system, and that forms plaque, and that stops the blood from pumping correctly through your heart, and that can eventually lead to a heart attack. From the perspective of not speaking your voice and self-censoring, it can have a somewhat similar effect. By not releasing the things you want to say and keeping it within your body, you create a lot of repression. You may have resentment or anger, you may have frustration, you may have shame at not releasing your voice. Over time, over years, that builds up and takes a real physical toll. And I know that personally because it's taken a toll on me, especially in my career, and especially at just feeling like I can't say certain things to my friends, to my family, or just generally publicly. Like I felt it in terms of my insomnia. Like I used to have very bad insomnia. My muscles get sore. I have bad back and bad neck. I also have sciatic pain as well. It's a feeling of your body tensing up. It's a somatic toll that it takes. And in the long run, it can have disastrous consequences. Now, spirituality, I think, can also give us some very useful insight. A little bit like psychology, but in many ways it can go much deeper. Now, on this channel, I'm going to have a look at spiritual traditions across the whole world. I'm not going to confine it to just the West or the East. I'm going to look at all traditions for possible answers, even indigenous or occult. But I think that if we're having a look at this current situation, an interesting tradition, or I guess religion you could say, is that of Gnosticism. It's early Christianity from around the 1st to 4th century AD. The modern church, or the mainstream church at the time, banned it around the 4th century AD, but it's basically the idea that we don't live in true reality. We live in a reality that was created by Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge. And Yaldabaoth has 7 archons who rule this realm. And that we are sparks of the divine, hence the channel name, and that we're trapped in this world. Whether it's a school or a prison, I don't know, but there are multiple schools of thought on it. But basically that we're trapped here and that we forget who we are. We have spiritual amnesia. Now, why it's relevant here is that there are a number of archons that kind of control the domains we're talking about today. The first archon is the archon that rules Venus, called Estephaos. Interestingly, this archon has a face of a hyena. And if you have a think about cancel culture, they're like predators, they're like hyenas. They are on the hunt for a target, for prey, and feast upon it. Like, they're not there for redemption, they're there to feast upon the prey and to basically publicly shame them. There's also the archon of Mars, Sabaoth. He has the body of a dragon, and he is the archon of conflict. You can kind of think of it as perpetual warfare, a never-ending conflict. And you know, we see that online, we see that in politics, we see that in society generally. The interesting thing with this archon is he is also known as the archon who rebels against the other archons in the demiurge and is redeemed. It's interesting. And then the other archon I can think of is that of Saturn, or Sebed. So Sebed has the face of shining fire. Sebed is like the all-seeing eye of Sauron. It's a cold, piercing eye that sees through all. It's not a warm light, it's a cold light. And Sebed is also the archon of restriction and creating rules. Again, that's very interesting given today's environment and basically the feeling that we're being constantly monitored and observed. Now, with all these archons, what they do is they create an environment where you forget you're a divine spirit and you think of yourself as just your physical body. And if you think that you're just your physical body, then you're going to act as if your current world is all there is, and it's very important to basically keep the peace and to protect yourself. You lose your true sense of self. You lose your authenticity, the spark of light within. You become like a non-player character where you're given a script and you live out that script. In ancient Greek myth, there's the Medusa, and she turns to stone. And I kind of think of this because if you're not being yourself, your authenticity and your true nature is calcifying, turning into stone. You have a light within yourself, but it's getting trapped. But there is hope, because in nature, there are some plants or some seeds that when a bright flash of light gets shone onto them, they sprout out and become huge trees. So no matter, how calcified you might be, you can still live your authenticity and be yourself. And in terms of how you might get that shining of light if you're in that situation, I guess it comes through as a tower moment. That's from tarot, and it's basically the idea that there's a huge external event that kind of completely shocks you and changes your way of being, hopefully and usually for the better. I know everything we ran through might seem a little bit bleak, but don't worry, there are some things that can be done. I'll run through a few techniques, and I will put links in the description below, because I'm just going to be going through these as a bit of a light touch. I could spend a very long time on each. The first one is the idea of the 5-second rule. So there was this lawyer, her name was Mel Robbins, who was $800,000 in debt. She basically hit rock bottom, and she was in bed watching TV, and she saw the countdown launch from NASA, rocket going up, and it was counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and she got an idea that on 1, she'll jump out of bed. And as she did that, what she discovered was she kind of short-circuited her brain. So what would often happen is she'd get caught in like a loop where she would consider doing something and wouldn't be able to do that thing because she'd get stuck. But if on 1 she jumped up and she went to do the action, it would propel her and make her do that. Her brain wouldn't be able to stop her. So that could be a good option for you. Another option relates to shadow work, and this is a very deep school of thought or kind of treatment protocol, and it comes from famous psychologist Carl Jung. It's basically the idea that each of us have a shadow, and the shadow is a collection of our repressed emotions, desires, characteristics that we prefer not to have others see, or prefer that we didn't have. And what you need to do with that is you need to talk to it, and you need to understand what it's trying to tell you. If you're angry, for example, why are you angry? What's the source of that? Are you doing something that is making your shadow side of yourself feel that way? For example, it could be where you're not expressing yourself, and you're kind of getting angry about that, or your perception of the world isn't what you want it to be, and you're not changing your circumstances. Then there's also the idea of viewing yourself as basically a separate entity. So you become an independent observer of yourself. And this is something I've done very recently, and I've found personally quite successful. I take the perspective that our consciousness and our thoughts or mind are separate. So I use my consciousness to observe my thoughts and realize that my thoughts are not who I am. So if I'm going through a rumination loop and I'm getting stuck on something, I realize, a program or a script has been triggered due to a certain event, and that, I analyze it a bit like a scientist to try and figure out what's going on, why I'm doing that. And as I'm doing that, it just becomes so much easier to jump out of it and stop it. It's a very, very useful protocol, I find. And then the last one which I guess I've saved the best for last, is just take action to do it. And this is literally what I'm doing right now. I'm facing one of my greatest fears, putting myself out there to the public, speaking my mind, and I guess I'm afraid of it because I know it's not perfect. I am a bit of a perfectionist, and it would have taken me months longer to get on a camera, at least if I had done it to the degree I wanted to, but time's running out and I'm seeing the world's changing very fast, and I just got to make a messy start. And for you, is there something in your life that, you can do the same thing for? You do have to be very mindful that, taking that huge leap can have quite big consequences. It can be quite scary, so you need to make sure you're mentally ready to do that. But for myself, I've gotten to the point where, I've done my shadow work. I've confronted my thoughts as to why I kind of think certain things, like why I shouldn't be on camera, why I didn't think I had a voice and that sort of thing. And I've gotten to a place now where, I'm comfortable enough to do that. For me, I'm starting messy, but it's better to start messy than to not start at all.